Welcome back to Wrong Sports, getting back into my What If series all about college football. My first two videos were about the pre-1970 decisions in college football that colleges and also the NCAA had to do. Plus, I also went over potential what if coaching hires and not hires in college football before 1970. Check that out in the description below, also in the upper right-hand corner. I'm going to be doing that exact same thing for these next two videos, except I'm only going to be covering the 1970s and 1980s. And this first video is going to be all about what if decisions, what if scandals that could have rocked college football. But before I get into that, make sure, as always, you are subscribed to the channel below. Also, ring that bell so you get updates on brand new videos that I will be dropping. I'm going to be having more what if videos coming out the rest of the summer. Plus, I am doing a series of shorts where I am breaking down all of the pre-Heisman winners. I am picking the Heisman winners from 1886 all the way until 1935. You can check that out right now in the archives. Just go to shorts. Please share this video, share this channel with more college sports fans. And check out my Patreon right now, patreon.com/wrongsports. I'm not going to be doing this in chronological order, but instead I'm going to be doing it in about three different parts. This first part is going to be two big decisions that a bunch of colleges could have done that could have really changed college football and also conferences as well. This first one is going to be, what if the College Football Alliance wasn't formed? This would lead to the 1984 lawsuit with Oklahoma suing the NCAA and eventually opening up all TV negotiations to colleges instead of through the NCAA, and it would also kill independence for many college football teams. But first, just a refresher, prior to 1979, the NCAA directly controlled all TV broadcasts. There was a single broadcast agreement with ABC, and schools pretty much made little to nothing, and there would also be other schools that would choose which schools got to be on TV. It was a whole big rigmarole. I'm not even going to go into that, but it changed in 1979 when members of the Southwest Conference, the Western Athletic Conference, the Big Eight, SEC, and ACC, along with independent schools like Notre Dame, Pitt, Penn State, and West Virginia, and the service academies, would form the College Football Alliance. This was made to negotiate their own TV deal. The Pac-8 and Big Ten would both abstain from this, as well as another big potential what if in the 1990s that I'm going to go over in a future video. But anyway, the NCAA would threaten these schools with banishment, but instead they were met with an antitrust lawsuit from one of their biggest members in the University of Oklahoma. I go over this whole lawsuit in a video I did all about TV and college football. You can actually check it out in the upper right-hand corner, also in the description below. But in the end, this would open up college football to be on TV all day long instead of just one or two games every weekend that got to be televised. And it also took away pretty much all the TV rights from the NCAA. But if this didn't happen, you have to wonder how much longer this arrangement with the NCAA and only putting one or two games on TV would have gone on for before Oklahoma sued or another school would have sued, maybe Notre Dame. In addition, the lawsuit stripped away a lot of the power the NCAA had, which had not happened since its inception decades before. And it would also push for more independent teams to move into a conference, as it was easier for a conference to get TV rights. So a lot of stuff changed due to this lawsuit. And if it didn't happen, you must wonder if there would be a lot more schools as an independent for longer than they did. And the only team that really was able to withstand being a lone wolf and independent was Notre Dame, as they got their own TV rights agreement just after this. But the school that sued, Oklahoma, is now in the SEC, enjoying the riches of being in one of the top two conferences in the country. But if this didn't happen, or if the College Football Alliance didn't all stand together to take on the NCAA, it could have taken even longer for colleges and universities to take control of their TV rights. And like I mentioned before, we may have had more independent college football teams still playing in Division I FBS instead of the two that we have now. And speaking of independent schools, this is going to go into my next what if. That would be, what if Penn State was voted into the Big East in 1982? In 1982, the Big East knew it needed to make a move to keep its football schools content for the time being. At this point, only Syracuse and Boston College were in the Big East and playing big-time college football. That was when the idea of admitting Penn State to join the conference to play basketball and football, and it would allow Syracuse and Boston College to have a guaranteed opponent to play while also staying independent for football. This idea was lofted among the 8-member schools and put to a vote, which Penn State lost 5-3 because they needed 6 votes to win. The conference elected to take Penn State's rival Pitt instead, and that one missed vote might be one of the most important moments to the success of Penn State athletics since then, as Penn State re-upped their membership with the Atlantic 10 and would play there for the next 10 years or so in all sports but football. And by the way, their football team would win the college football national championship in 1982 and then again in 1986. They were one of the best programs throughout the 80s and 90s. And yes, Penn State basketball wasn't the best, and Penn State is not located in or really near any large eastern markets. They're like 3 hours, maybe 4 hours from Philly. It's quite far from New York City as well. So that was a real big reason many schools used to vote against them. But had Penn State joined the Big East in 1982, they probably still would have won the national title that year as well, as Penn State would have only had to play Syracuse and BC according to their Big East agreement, and Penn State was already playing these two teams, so it wasn't really going to be a big change. Along with that, it is a big kick in the shins that the Big East didn't do this, as it would have made the Big East probably the best all-around conference, as along with Penn State's national titles, Big East teams would win the national title in basketball in 1984 and 1985, and this is routinely mentioned as one of the biggest blunders the Big East ever did, and they did a lot of them, so that is telling. Also, it would have been pretty insane when the 90s came around and the Big East got Miami. You would have had Miami, Penn State, Virginia Tech, Boston College, Pitt, all in the same conference. It would have been crazy. Okay, so after those first two, these next two are going to be pretty tough to talk about, but they have to do with big-time programs in the 1970s and 1980s and would eventually be conference mates, one of them being Penn State that I just mentioned, and another being Michigan. And this what if has to do with scandals, as in what if both the Penn State Sandusky crimes came out earlier and weren't covered up, and what if Michigan's Dr. Anderson scandal also wasn't covered up? So I am sure a lot of you know about the Penn State Sandusky horribleness, and I'm not even going to go over that. But what about Michigan's terrible Dr. Anderson, who has over 1,000 victims? And okay, I just want to preface this by saying I am not comparing these horrible people or the crimes, because they were both terrible, but they do have a lot in common except for the victims. But again, not going to go into really either one of their crimes. You can look them up, and I also don't want this video to be demonetized. But the reason I am lumping these two together is because both assaulters were employees and most of their crimes happened in athletic buildings. So that's why I say, what if the Jerry Sandusky scandal wasn't covered up? Would the NCAA have done what they did to SMU only years later and give them the death penalty? Or do what they did to Kentucky basketball decades before and tell other schools not to schedule them? I think the second thought would have been easier to do to Penn State, because Penn State was an independent school through the 1980s, and this could have really set Penn State back very far and even potentially out of Division I FBS. So again, I am not apologizing for the school at all, but this would have also set Joe Paterno away from Penn State sooner. It would have turned the whole athletic department upside down, and yet they covered it up for 20 years. It got found out. It made everyone look worse anyways. And this could really go the same for the University of Michigan, which has their own terrible scandal associated with that doctor, Dr. Robert Anderson, who, like I mentioned, has over 1,000 victims. Most of them were male athletes too. And his crimes and the cover-up by the school is a little different than Penn State, as the victims were athletes. And one of them was also Bo Schembechler's son, which was only found out years later. Anderson never saw justice, as he died before the scandal was shown to light, and it also showed that many in Ann Arbor, like their athletic director from 1968 to 1988, Don Canham, either knew of the scandal and covered it up, or just disregarded it. Also, Bo Schembechler, who was the coach during that whole time and also was the athletic director from 1988 to 1990, is also involved in this, as like I mentioned, his son was one of the victims. So if he would have blown the whistle on this sooner, I'm sure there would have been a different future for Michigan. Again, like Penn State, since the NCAA were in the spotlight more in the 1980s, if this scandal came to light along with Penn State, would these two schools have gotten the death penalty? I mean, Michigan in the 1980s had the Big Ten to defend them, unlike Penn State, so different paths would have been made for either school, and it's just a big what if that really doesn't have an answer to it, but I just wanted to bring it out there and just mention it because I feel like it needs to be mentioned, especially because I'm going to piggyback on the last two scandals, because what if one of those two schools got caught earlier? Would it have helped SMU not get the death penalty? Or what about if SMU didn't get the death penalty or weren't found out about their big pay-for-play scandal that they had? This is another twofer, as obviously we all know about the SMU football program getting the death penalty in 1987, which canceled that season and the next one, and it also took the school 30 years to get back to winning consistently again. But SMU were not given the death penalty without numerous opportunities to stop doing what they were doing. Instead, they were given the death penalty because they were already on probation from a 1985 punishment. Along with that, it is well known that officials of the slush fund for the school, including the governor of Texas, stopped payment for future recruits, but still had to make their payroll for the current roster. And like a boat with a hole in it, you can only keep throwing water out for so long before it sinks, and in SMU's case, it sunk pretty hard. But had SMU managed to hide their slush fund from the NCAA for a little bit longer, they could be on a totally different path right now. They, for one, could have maybe been in the Big 12, or the biggest, the Southwest Conference, might still be around. SMU's death penalty was also the death knell for the Southwest Conference, as Arkansas was already looking to get out, as they were the only non-Texas school, but it also gave the opening for Texas, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, and Baylor to get out as well and go to the Big 12. And for SMU, they were left to rot until 2007 when they eventually hired June Jones, who got them back to their winning ways. And they somehow cobbled together $50 million to get themselves into the ACC recently, which has paid off pretty big as they got into the college football playoff as well. But it took 30 years, a lot of terrible teams, and a bunch of money to get them to this point. And one final thing, again, piggybacking on the previous what if, that would be what if another school got the death penalty? SMU was not the only school in the Southwest Conference that were in trouble, as in the 1980s, pretty much every other school in the Southwest Conference got some sort of punishment from the NCAA for recruiting violations or some sort of slush fund or something along those lines. So what if one of these teams got the death penalty instead of SMU? According to the ESPN 30 for 30 and the book about the SMU scandal, A Payroll to Meet, the NCAA didn't want to use this new punishment on any team. It was voted in only a few years before, and it was used and created because of the brazenness of many Southwest Conference teams. TCU would have a pretty big scandal that rocked their football team in 1986, and if it wasn't for the coaches and school administrators suspending those players, it could have gone totally different for TCU, and they could have potentially gotten the death penalty. But to move out of the Southwest Conference, how about Kentucky basketball, which had an entire season canceled in the 1950s because of a gambling scandal? Kentucky also got in big trouble in 1989, just after SMU got the death penalty for paying players, and it was debated about if Kentucky basketball should get the death penalty. Kentucky ultimately didn't because they did clear house and got rid of those suspected players. Plus, after seeing how decimated the SMU football program was in 1989, the NCAA nixed doing the death penalty on Kentucky and instead gave Kentucky a 2-year postseason ban. So basically, the NCAA found their lab rat in SMU to test the death penalty on, and it showed just how much power it could wield if it unleashed the death penalty on another school again. And pretty much I see an article every year about someone wondering what if another school got the death penalty, or what if SMU didn't get the death penalty. So we could be discussing that for a while. But thank you so much for hanging out with me, and tell me if there is another what if you can think about that has to do with a school or an NCAA decision, not having to do with coaches. That's going to be in my next episode. But tell me if you can think of another what if, and tell me in the comments below. Also, make sure you like this video, share this video with other college sports fans, and please subscribe to the channel and check out my Patreon right now, patreon.com/wrongsports.